It's one of the most watched races across the country. Whomever wins this one will become the first female senator to represent Arizona in history. But the clock is ticking with early ballots already on their way, and in less than 30 days, Arizonans will go to the polls. Republican Martha McSally is running against Democrat Kyrsten Sinema, and this morning we're talking with both of them right here on Good Morning Arizona. But first, as you can see, we are joined by Republican candidate Martha McSally.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for taking the time. I know you're very busy.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. I mentioned the historical factor.
Yeah.
You have been known to break glass ceilings before throughout your lifetime.
Yeah.
Has it set in the historical factor, or will you get an opportunity to let that set in after?
Yeah, I think afterwards. I mean, just like when I was the first woman to fly in combat in U.S. history, at the time I wasn't thinking about that, right? I was thinking about doing the mission, making sure that we protected the troops on the ground. Same thing when I commanded men and women in combat as the first female fighter squadron commander. So right now we're on the cusp of a historic election for sure. I think it's not about necessarily gender, but it certainly would be the honor to be the first woman senator in Arizona's history. But right now it's about who's the best person to represent Arizona as we go into the next 6 years and the important things that matter to most Arizonans. Cutting taxes, supporting our military, securing our border, and really looking at the options that they have and what we've done with our lives and what we've put our passion into. And so I hope people get an opportunity to kind of get to know me a little bit more in these next 26 days as they're voting.
I know you say it's not about gender, but there seems to be a movement across the country known as the Me2 Movement here across the country. Do you feel added pressure because of the historical nature of this race to properly represent women?
I want to represent everybody, and again, as someone who broke barriers in the military, fighting for girls and women, and someone who's a survivor myself, I think it's really important that women do have a voice, that women are able to speak up and have a place where they can, be everything they want to be, and they're not held back and they're not held down. And so that has been really the calling of my life. After I lost my dad when I was 12 and went through some rough circumstances, surviving abuse as a fatherless teenager. That it really could have crushed me, and it almost did, but it propelled me to fight for others, to find my voice, and to fight for others who don't have a voice. And that's what I did wearing the uniform, protecting our freedoms, 6 deployments to the Middle East and Afghanistan, and flying the A-10 Warthog. And that's what I've been doing since I've been in Congress, fighting for those who feel like maybe they don't have a voice, both men and women.
With this movement, a lot of women feel they haven't had a voice. I want to ask you about this because yesterday Melania Trump, with reference to Brett Kavanaugh and Christine Blasey Ford, came out and said, "I do stand with women, but we need to show evidence." Your thoughts on that statement that received a lot of backlash yesterday?
Well, look, again, as a survivor myself, I think it really is important for women to find their voice, whether that's publicly or privately, telling others, telling loved ones, what they've been through, preventing the next abuses that could be happening, the abuse of power, having the conversation for healing as a country. I think it is important. But we are also a country that has innocence until proven guilty as a standard. And we do have due process so that, people do have the opportunity to defend themselves and see whether there's a pattern of behavior. In my case, my track coach, I wasn't the only victim. And he was over twice our age, abusing the power over us. There's many women and some men that have been through these awful situations. And so we as a country need to not be weaponizing this, not turning it into something divisive and political, from my view. That as we push forward, I think it's important for us to respect people to have a voice for what they've been through, but also to respect due process. So I can be for survivors and for saying I would vote for Justice Kavanaugh based on these circumstances and what was presented, with no other corroborating evidence and no other pattern in his life. My opponent obviously said that she would vote no, which is out of step with where most Arizonans are right now. Let's
move forward and talk about the latest poll numbers, because you seem to be surging. What do you attribute that to?
Well, I think people are finally getting to know who I am, what I've done with my life. They're breaking through and kind of seeing the contrast of the passions of their options here. I've given my life to our freedoms, serving in uniform. My opponent wanted to shut down Luke Air Force Base and was protesting our military. For example, I voted for your tax cuts. I'm leading on border security, the things that matter to most Arizonans. I was ranked the 9th most effective member of Congress, always working in a bipartisan way for my 20 bills I got passed through the House and 5 signed into law. So I think people are now paying more attention. They're getting their ballots. They're starting to tune in and do their research and try try and identify who really aligns most with Arizona values. We have a long history of electing people who are strong on our military, who served in our military, whether that's Barry Goldwater, Senator McCain. John Kyle has also been a strong national security leader, and that's something we need to make sure we preserve. And I think people are waking up and seeing that.
Let me ask you about these political ads, because it's hard to avoid them. They're on every TV station. Do you think these political ads are working?
Well, I can just share, the ones that we're responsible for, and we thought it was really important for people to see who I am leading on the issues that I'm leading on, but also to break through the millions of dollars that have been spent in order to portray my opponent as someone who is right of center when she's not. She comes from being a radical left activist, protesting our troops, depicting us as skeletons in the flyers she was handing out for the multiple protests that she led. Again, advocating calling herself a proud socialist, as a Green Party activist. And even since she's been in Congress, when given the opportunity to vote to keep the government open and support our troops or shut it down over illegal immigration, she chose with Chuck Schumer to shut it down, just as one example. So it's important for people to know the full record of what people have given their passion to and what they voted on. And that, I think, does make a difference for people.
Some of the attack ads have been debunked. Your thoughts on those?
Well, again, I would just ask people to do their own research. Kyrsten Sinema was in the state legislature. It was her words advocating for Johns over the victims of child sex trafficking, saying 12 and 13-year-olds looked older, like adults, and it's not fair for the Johns. Those were her words. We didn't put those words in her mouth. We didn't put her in a pink tutu. So we'd ask people to really do their own research, and then again, look at what we've done with our lives. For me, I left home at 18 after losing my dad, looking for a good opportunity for education. My mom was a widow, mother of now 5 kids, single mom, went back to school and back to work as a public school educator. And I worked hard in the military in order to protect our freedoms and our rights. And since I've been in Congress, I've also been working for things that matter most for Arizona.
Well, I know you just signed on to debate October 15th.
Yes.
We're all looking forward to that.
Yes.
We thank you very much for your time. We wish you the best of luck. Coming up in an hour, we will sit down with Kyrsten Sinema and do the same conversation as we're doing here. You're going to want to stick around for that. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.